I didn't really know anything about Cult of the Lamb until my partner brought it up to me a few months back. She loves the game for its addicting gameplay, but also for its prominent lore. But even with 200 plus hours in the game, she still had many questions about how the overall narrative worked. That was enough for me to realize there is a lot buried beneath the game's surface, even if you've beaten it once or twice. And that was all it took for us to dive in and sift through everything. In this video, we're going to cover the lore of the game and its digital comic, as well as our theories for the franchise so that you can be fully caught up to date with the latest developments. As a quick side note, there are a good few Cult of the Lamb comics and a graphic novel, but the Pilgrim comic, the one in the game itself, is the only canon one in the series. So without further ado, grab your flail, your crown, and your tarot cards, and let's delve into the lore of Cult of the Lamb. The land we know in-game is called the Lands of the Old Faith, but it wasn't always owned or even created by the Old Faith. Beings known as the First Gods created this land many years ago by separating it from their native mainland. They did this by utilizing the power of a curse called the Oath of the Crown. From there, these First Gods began shaping the land in their image, utilizing the godly hammer. The rules of this land differ from those of our world, as the land is not fixed or stationary. It's reactive to the beings in power. These gods gain their power from special objects known as crowns. Each of the crowns have their own special abilities and powers, empowering their wielders and giving them immortality. These crowns have their own eyes and are basically living, immortal beings. While they don't require food and water, they gain strength from the sacrifice of living creatures. They can also gain strength and power from the number of followers or worshippers their crown bearer has access to. Thus, the crown and their god have a symbiotic relationship. The crown, while powerful, needs a vessel to be able to use its power. The crown wielder is a mortal or a vessel with no power, which makes them perfect for each other. They benefit from one another when paired together and basically merge into one being. With that said, each of the First Gods, with their special crowns, manipulated their delegated portion of the land to how they see fit. But with the isolation and creation of this new land, a new entity came into being. This ethereal being is 3 question marks, or as seen in the game files, the Mystic Seller. Their purpose will be revealed later. As for now, they appear to live in the ether, which for all intents and purposes is basically like interdimensional goo. It's basically the material that makes the universe. It flows and exists in a space that may not experience time. The ether is also used by some beings to see the past, present, and future all at once. That said, there is no evidence the First Gods even knew of the Mystic Seller or their creation of them. Anyway, the First Gods then established some universal rules or laws. Or maybe these laws were already in place, it's not clear. In this world of animals, the law of nature is this power or force that guides the animals. Animals have a list, kinda, of things that are within their capability and things that aren't, or things they should not do. This isn't like a physical list, it's just a general idea of list items. For example, the last of the First Gods created 3 beings to hold powerful objects like weapons, curses, crowns, and tarot cards. These beings were 3 birds, Klonek, Kadai, and Kemek. Though they were able to hold these great amounts of power, they were unable to wield the power themselves, and for the most part, they didn't want to since it went against their nature. Kadai, the yellow bird, is implied to be the oldest of the flock. He was made to be a blacksmith. He could create and provide powerful curses and weapons to crown holders, but Kadai would not wield the weapons and curses for himself. Klonek, the red bird, drew tarot cards that told the fate of all who came to him, and the cards granted those beings with power. Klonek also used and conversed with the ether to understand the past, present, and future. He was something of a seer and would prophesize about things, but that'll become more important later on. Kemek, the blue bird, was the last of the flock. While she appears to be insane in-game, she wasn't always this way. She was once sane and the keeper of the crowns. I say keeper as she did not make the crowns herself, at least not at first. She was tasked with giving these powerful crowns to those who fit the First God's criteria for godlyhood. And with that, these 3 bird siblings did what their nature told them to do, to practice their skills and assist the gods, but never to wield their power for themselves. The First Gods created this land, the crowns, and the birds, and then they seemed to vanish with an unknown fate, leaving behind only their ichor, tears, and crowns, and ending the era of the First Gods. So, to recap, the first gods, however many there are, thought it'd be funny if they broke off a whole chunk of their mainland and separated it, making basically their own island from this chunk. The first gods split the island's ownership amongst themselves, and each of them got to decide how their portion looked. At some point during these activities, an interdimensional void blob, the Mystic Cellar, came into existence, and it was just kind of there. And the last of the first gods created the 3 birds to hold powerful items to assist future gods, as these first gods seem to believe they had an expiration date, even though, aren't you guys supposed to be immortal? Anyway, then they poofed out of existence. And with the end of the era of the first gods came a new era, one which would be decided by one of their very own creations. With the first gods MIA, Kemek, when she was still sane, was tasked with choosing new gods to follow in the first god's footsteps. We know of 3 gods chosen by Kemek, but the order of which isn't clear or really that important. The first chosen god was a being known as the Fanatic, this snake-like creature. Kemek saw that the Fanatic followed the criteria of the first gods, and so she gave them the Amber Crown. The Fanatic became a devoted follower of the first gods, aspiring for greatness, and they wore the crown with honor and pride. The Fanatic was devout and followed the first god's teachings of peace and the importance of following one's nature. They refused to listen to or adopt anyone into their cult who went against these ideas. Similarly to the Fanatic, the second chosen god followed the first god's teachings and believed in the peace and prosperity of the lands. He was the great owl Harrow, the god of the hunt. He received the Orange Crown with the ability to strengthen the fortune of hunting for his followers. And the last known god chosen by Kemek was Yngya, the god of lambs. And to those of you who are already getting ahead of me, yes, this is the same Yngya in the Woolhaven DLC. Yngya received the Cyan Crown, a crown capable of controlling winter and blizzards. She followed the teachings of the first gods and was especially peaceful in nature. So far, these 3 chosen gods appear to be pretty nice. No murderous or greedy intent. But trust me when I say this peace is temporary. While Kemek continued her quest to find qualified candidates for the crown, an incident occurred. Madness consumed her, and she went against her nature, creating her own crown and abandoning her job as the keeper of the crowns. In the Pilgrims comic, in-game, we can see that Kemek was tempted by the power the crowns held. She craved the power she gave others, wanting just a little bit of it for herself. In wanting this power, she was going against her very nature, something that should not be possible, but her desire was so strong that she broke this nature. Afterwards, Kemek lost all of the crowns she was in charge of holding. They just sort of dispersed themselves across the land. And this was when she began her obsession with relics. Relics are pieces of gods that hold great power. The gods do not have to be alive for the relic to still exist. Relics in Cult of the Lamb are very useful as they show the history of what once was and are a glimpse into what gods used to exist. Kemek even begins changing these relics, and according to her, she can make them better. With her new crown that she made, possibly out of her own legs, she then began her search for the other aspects that make up a cult and an accompanying god. She wanted her own temple and followers, but without having anyone willing to follow her, she started creating her own followers out of small critters and any anthropomorphic animals she could find. She did this against their will though, stuffing the living creatures into sacks and placing them in her homemade temple. You gotta love a little DIY queen. With no one watching over the crowns and choosing the right beings to hold said crowns, order began to fall, which leads us to the next and third era. With Kemek off playing Build-A-Cult, crowns are scattered around the land. In come 5 new gods who had discovered their crowns on their own, finding them in odd places: Shamura, Kalamar, Narinder, Hecate, and Leshy. Each of these creatures, before they found their crowns, were just like normal animals. Head empty, survival was their only goal. But the crowns granted these mortal beings godlike powers, ascending them to places they'd never imagined. Shamura the spider is the oldest of the 5. They had found the purple crown after it fell into their web. The purple crown granted Shamura wisdom and ideas of war. They're suspected to have gone to the Fanatic with their ideas of war and world domination, but the Fanatic denounced said ideas and cast Shamura from their cult. Shamura wanted to be in control of all those in the land. They craved power. Shamura thought that any other cult or religion was an enemy to their new cult, the cult of the Old Faith. Shamura then found and brought the other 4 together, making them all bishops, or in other words, equals. They became siblings of the Old Faith together. Shamura had grand visions of them ruling over the land under their own beliefs and stomping out all who opposed them. Shamura's followers were given knowledge and strength in exchange for worshipping the bishop. The next bishop of the newly founded Old Faith was Kalamar the Squid. He's the second oldest of the siblings. While there's no information we can find on how he acquired his crown, I'd like to imagine that he just swam into it one day by accident. This blue crown gave Calamar the ability to control pestilence, also known as illness. Calamar doesn't seem to be the smartest of the group and is not keen on listening to what others have to say. I'd like to think he only joined the Old Faith in order to keep his crown and stay alive, fearing Shimura. Those who followed Calamar were granted health and wellness in exchange for their loyalty. Calamar in-game is rather cowardly, being extremely fearful of our next bishop, Narinder. This black cat is the middle child of the group. Narinder's crown was the red crown, or the crown of death. Though we don't know how he acquired it, I imagine he was just being a cat, knocking things over, and the crown somehow fell on his head. With this red crown, Narinder became the god of death. He was granted immortality, as with all gods, but was also granted the ability to choose how one died, peacefully or with torture and suffering. I believe that Narinder joined the bishops of the Old Faith, as total domination sounded highly compelling to him. Next, we have Hecate the Frog, who is the fourth of the group. She held the yellow crown. This is another case where we have no idea how she got it, but she probably just hopped onto it one day. This yellow crown gave Hecate control over hunger and famine. Hecate joined the bishops of the Old Faith, and while we don't have a concrete reason why, she seems to agree with Shimura's ideas. Hecate's followers would come to be granted fertile soils and bountiful harvests to combat famines. But speaking of soil, Leshy the Worm is the last and youngest bishop of the group. Leshy discovered the green crown one day as he was wiggling about. Later, Leshy wondered if he found the crown that day, or if the crown had found him. The green crown is known as the Crown of Chaos. Leshy became the wild card of the group, but grew into his power quickly according to the mystic Seller. Leshy's followers give their bodies to feed Leshy's hunger in turn for safety. Bro is freaky! And thus completes our introduction of the Old Faith bishops. While the siblings were finding their crowns and assembling, hundreds of other creatures discovered crowns of their own and established their own cults. So basically there's hundreds of different cults and gods wielding crowns they shouldn't even have. But the chosen gods Yngya, Hero, and the Fanatic still remained. With the bishops of the Old Faith assembled, they agreed on a goal to become the sole cult, dominate this world, and take ownership of the land permanently. They wanted this land to be known as the Lands of the Old Faith. So with their hunger for power and conquest, they began their crusade to convert every god or destroy them should they not comply. The deaths of gods commenced. With the killings of these lesser-known gods, their crowns began disappearing with them. In their hunt, the bishops of the Old Faith found Hero and told him to comply or die. With the threat of death, Hero relinquished the power of his crown, killing it in order to live. But he did not follow in the bishops of the Old Faith's religion. By killing his crown, possibly by poking the crown's eyes out, the crown lost its ability to grant prosperity in hunts. The husk of the crown, however, still granted Hero immortality. You can see him in-game, which is thousands of years after when this is occurring, so it's safe to say Hero is immortal. Since Hero no longer held power and sacrificed his ability to lead cults, the bishops granted him mercy and let him live. Yngya, seeing the slaughter of the gods, hid her people in the mountains. Winter ceased, and together with her people, they created a new paradise called Woolhaven. The Fanatic renounced Hero for betraying the first gods and thought Hero cowardly. The Fanatics swore eternal allegiance to the first gods and would rather die than sacrifice their beliefs to a false idol. The Fanatic, along with many others, were killed by the bishops. After the slaughter of the other gods, the bishops of the Old Faith had the only religion that remained. There was a sort of peace after the bloodshed. Years passed, and the four bishops, Shimura, Calamar, Hecate, and Leshy, changed over time. Narinder, however, could not change, as death was a very black and white thing. Though he could choose how people died, it became boring and monotonous. Shimura saw how lonely and bored Narinder was and decided to gift him companionship. Shimura found Phornius, a black cat mother and merchant, with two small kittens. Shimura took the kittens in the name of the Old Faith, and though Phornius wished she could say no and to keep her children, how could one say no to a god? Shimura gave the kittens to her favorite sibling, hoping it could cure the loneliness Narinder felt. These kittens, Aim and Baal, grew to be the left and right-hand men to Narinder, and though it helped a little, the god of death longed for more. Shimura, hoping to help Narinder again, used their knowledge instead of gifts. They reluctantly introduced him to ideas of change. See, up until now, Narinder's siblings have been able to experiment with their crown's abilities and how they use them. Though change and experimentation can work for many things, it cannot work for death. Because he was bored, Narinder began experimenting with death. He tried resurrecting his own deceased followers, and in doing so, Narinder was going against nature and altering the course of fate. By now, we've established you're not supposed to do that. Regardless, Norinda was starting to have fun again. But Shamura and the other bishops grew fearful and angry because, according to them, only gods could be immortal. The fuel for the crowns, sacrifice, was becoming null and void. The strength of the other bishops was starting to fade, and when they looked at their brother Norinda, they noticed he was growing stronger. Soon, the god of death received many followers who hungered for eternal life and praised Norinda for what he had offered them. The old faith could not allow Norinda to keep going against nature and destroying what separated gods from mortals. For what gives sacrifice meaning if you can bring life back? The 4 bishops knew that they had to stop him, but they couldn't exactly kill the god of death. They had to trap him somewhere he could not escape, in limbo between life and death. So the bishops went to Norinda and a battle commenced. Norinda was strong and would not go down without a fight. In this ferocious conflict, the death god took a piece from every bishop, representing the 3 wise monkeys with the twist. Leshy's eye was cut out, which represents see no evil. Hecate's throat was cut out, representing speak no evil. Calamar's ears were cut off, hear no evil, and Shamura's mind was cut out so they could think no evil. But Norinda was not unscathed in battle. The bishops managed to take a piece of him, ripping out his claw. Thus, Norinda could do no evil. By the end of the battle, the bishops were successful in trapping Norinda and the Red Crown in limbo, each bishop using their crown as a chain to keep him locked away. There, while Norinda was imprisoned, he became the one who waits for someone to set him free. After this, Klonek, one of the birds from the first gods, made a prophecy about the god of death. Praise the Lamb, conduit to great power, promised liberator of the one who waits below. Yet sacrificial beast, take heed, for a crown cannot sit upon 2 brows. The old faith, in hearing this prophecy, began hunting down and killing all the lambs to permanently keep Norinda locked away. After all, with no lambs, there'd be no freedom for their banished brother, right? That's when the old faith realized that there weren't that many lambs in the land anyway. Nonetheless, they began searching for Yngya and Woolhaven, having remembered her from so long ago. Okay, so that might have been a lot of information at once. Allow me to do a quick little recap so we're all on the same page. The first gods created this land, the crowns and these 3 birds who hold powerful shit, but they're not allowed to use any of it because that's against their nature. The first gods disappear, poof, Kemek, the bird that holds the crowns, starts slinging out crowns to those who fit the criteria of the first gods. The 3 chosen gods are Yngya, Hero, and the Fanatic. Then Kemek goes against her nature. She goes insane and makes her own crown out of her own legs? What? She then loses all the crowns and they're everywhere. Random normies find the crowns and become gods, including the 5 that become bishops of the old faith. These siblings kill all the other gods, including the Fanatic, but excluding Yngya, who is hiding, and Hero, who gives up his power. The old faith become the main religion of the land until Norinda gets bored. He starts fucking with the law of nature and resurrects mortals for fun. But his siblings start losing their power as he gets stronger. So they fight him and trap him in limbo. Funny tarot bird, Klonek, prophesies that a lamb would free the one who waits / Norinda from his prison. So the old faith goes on to exterminate the lambs, but realizes that there aren't that many of them. Then they're like, oh shit, you guys remember Yngya in winter? She's totally a lamb. Let's go find and kill her. And with that, we should be all caught up, leading us to Yngya and the lambs. So when Yngya and her followers went into hiding, they created Woolhaven as a safe place for lambkind to live in peace in the snow, and that they did. For however long, the old faith rose into power until the prophecy was told. The village was happy for a time before the old faith discovered their paradise. Yngya confronted the bishops, trying to protect her followers. Whatever conversation that transpired, though, did not end well, as the bishops could not allow any other gods to exist, let alone a lamb god. They then used a unique weapon named Yngya's Torment to kill her. The flail was crafted by Kudai for the sole purpose of ending the leader. With Yngya gone, there was no one to lead and protect the lambs. The bishops began gradually executing the lambs of the village during raids. In one of the many raids on Woolhaven, Aniel the Scholar, one of Yngya's disciples, was hiding from raiders when a baby lay near her, screaming and crying. For fear of being caught, she put the baby in a basket and placed the carrier in a nearby river, which flowed down the mountain. Aniel hoped for the baby's safety and survival, but put her own survival over that of the baby. Aniel was able to successfully hide from the raiders, but she felt pain and regret for sending the baby down the river. After an unknown amount of village raids, one of the closest disciples to Yngya, Sariel the Resolute, came up with a plan. Sariel, who was sort of a clothing historian, was deeply devoted to Yngya and could not bear to live without his goddess. After most of the lamb villagers were slaughtered, he brought up a proposal to what remained of the disciples. The first of the remaining was Aniel the Scholar, the river baby basket girl from before, and historian of the village. Then there was Barak, the rancher, who raised livestock, which seems a little weird as he is an anthropomorphic lamb, and the livestock is not anthropomorphic. Third, there was Koka the Stargazer. She was the mother of twin lambs, Azza and Karu, and she was a spiritual sheep who sold tarot cards. Then there's Rami the Charred, who was a blacksmith and ex-apprentice of Kudai. Yikes, imagine your old boss made the weapon that killed your god. Awkward. The last of the remaining disciples, we have Chizak the Shrewd, who was a cranky decorations salesman. Sariel proposed to this group that they should perform a ritual to solve their problems. Sariel probably said something like, "Listen, we are being hunted and murdered by the Old Faith. We have no one to save or lead us because Yngya is dead. Why are we sitting idly by while these haters slaughter every last one of us? There is something we can do to make the world feel the pain that we feel. They will rue the day that they slaughtered every last lamb." The remaining disciples were like, "Well, you know what? Hell yeah, let's do that." This ritual required power and sacrifice that you would not believe. The group needed to use a piece of their god, as well as their own flesh and souls, to perform it. And so they did. They took Yngya's dead heart into the depths of the mountain and enacted the ritual that would call all lamb spirits to the ceremony. Their curse made it so that after the last lamb died, a rot would be unleashed upon the world. Being angry at the world for being hunted and sacrificed, these lambs offered up the heart of their own god to enact their revenge while additionally sacrificing their own flesh to curse the world with rot. Based? Their hatred fueled this rot, and the scourge would grow and consume everything once every last lamb was slaughtered. Many sacrifices were made in the final days of the last lambs, and Koka's tablet implies that she even had to kill her own children. Maybe she did this to protect them from a more brutal death, or perhaps it was only for the ritual, but she couldn't allow one of the other lambs to end her own children's lives. She felt it was her responsibility. So the ritual took place, and all the lambs were killed by the Old Faith, or sacrificed in the rot ritual to end the world. All except for one, the lamb in the basket. Now that you have the history and context for Cult of the Lamb, this is where the in-game events actually begin. We open with the prophecy from Klonak. The lamb, you, is in chains and must walk down a path to where the 4 bishops of the Old Faith wait. The executioner does her duty with a swift cut of the axe, and the lamb is transported? With head and body intact, the little guy just appears in a white expanse, some kind of limbo. You walk up the path and find the one who waits. He makes a deal with you. You need to make a cult in the name of this banished god and destroy the 4 bishops, which upon doing so, will release him from limbo. If the lamb agrees to do this, then they get to live instead of dying right here and now. But it's not like you really get a choice. The lamb returns to the surface. The bishops and executioner are gone, but some of the Old Faith followers linger. This red crown you received from the one who waits has the ability to transform into a weapon. So naturally you kill the followers and make your escape from the woods. That's when this rat, Ratau, appears and tells you he is here because the one who waits told him to aid you. Ratau then teaches the lamb how to make and run a cult. After showing the lamb everything they must know, Ratau retires to his lonely shack in the woods. But who is this Ratau? And why does he wear a paper crown? Well, once upon a time, Ratau faced death similar to the lamb. He was given the same offer that the lamb received, and he accepted. Fortunately or not, Ratau did not have a malicious bone in his body. He was incapable of making the sacrifices needed to run a successful cult and to destroy the bishops. We can learn some of this information from a mysterious red fox during the night in various areas around the lands of the Old Faith. This red fox used to be a follower of Ratau and his cult, but they thought Ratau was a coward and despised him. Ratau, being unable to perform the violent acts necessary to run a cult, chose to do what he did best. He gambled. He made a deal with the one who waits that would allow Ratau to keep his life if he showed the next red crown bearer the ways of making a cult. The one who waits accepted this deal, and Ratau was able to keep his life. It's actually very chill of Durandar. That said, Ratau wasn't able to go against his nature. He wasn't able to hurt others for his own benefit, or at least not in a violent way. I mean, this guy's a gambler at heart. He will play knucklebones and hoard your gold if he's given the chance. But Ratau was important for the fate of the one who waits, and you, the lamb, as he gives you the opportunity to run a cult and teaches you all that he knows. Side note, you can give Ratau to the red fox, and the red fox will eat him. After you do that, you can find rough draft letters Ratau wrote intended for you about how he is so grateful you're friends and that he's proud of you for everything you've accomplished, making you feel like the monster that you truly are. Ain't that fun? But back to the main story. After you start your cult, you must enter this area full of doors. For our purposes, I'm going to call it the hallway. This hallway has 5 doors, a doorway to Anchor Deep, Kalamar's area, a door to Darkwood, Leshy's area, and you've got the door to Anura, which is Hecat's area, a door to the Silk Cradle, Shemara's area, and in the center, the sealed door to the One Who Waits. With your single cult follower, you're able to unlock Darkwood, the home and habitat of Leshy and his disciples. In your exploration, you will meet many different creatures, some friendly, some not so much. After traversing these woods 4 times, Leshy's temple unlocks. You enter, and you meet the worm and his flock of disciples. They sacrifice themselves to strengthen Leshy and his green crown. Leshy transforms into this huge-ass worm, and a boss battle ensues. After defeating him, the lock on the door breaks and you acquire the Heart of a Heretic, which strengthens your red crown. Entering the hallway again, you see one of the chains on the sealed door break. 1 down, 3 to go. At some point during all this exploration, if you were playing solo and died during one of the dungeons, you may happen upon a statue leaking ichor sitting in a pool. This statue is similar to your cult statue of a lamb, except it's a little different. It's a statue of a goat. It calls out to you from the unknown, asking for you to reach into the ichor and to what may have been. The statue says that corruption is seeking you. This is the game's introduction of the goat. You're able to swap places and become the goat inside of your temple if you're playing solo, or you can have a friend be the goat and play alongside you, couch co-op style. While there isn't much concrete information on the goat, there is a lot of speculation as to the identity of the creature. From my research, it seems that the goat is from a different timeline or parallel universe, a universe in which instead of lambs being the center of the prophecy, it was goats. There's also plenty of speculation that in this alternate reality, Shemara is in place of the One Who Waits, locked in limbo. The developers have mentioned they have more for the goat's story, but are waiting for the optimal place and time to tell it. So potentially in the future, there will be more lore for us to latch onto. Did this goat make a deal with Shemara? Is this goat our brother from another mother? Time will tell. But let's put a pin in the goat story for now and get back to the lamb lore. To save us some time on explaining every area in the hallway and the lands of the Old Faith, let's do a quick speedrun. You enter each of these 3 different areas 4 times, and on the 4th entry, that area's temple unlocks. There you meet the bishop of the area, fight and defeat them, take their yummy heretic hearts that strengthen your red crown, and their chains break. After all of them are defeated, all the chains are broken to the sealed door. Entering the chamber, all that keeps you from limbo and the One Who Waits is the need for a strong enough cult with many members. With your many cult followers by your side, you enter limbo. There he waits. You have 2 options: relinquish the red crown to the One Who Waits and give up your cult, or refuse. If you relinquish your crown, the One Who Waits breaks his chains and all your limbs. Roll credits. But if you refuse, a battle ensues. First you fight Ball, one of the kittens given to the One Who Waits, and his left-hand man. Then Aim, the other kitten, and his right-hand man. Finally, you fight the One Who Waits. In 2 phases. After defeating him in battle, you have 2 choices: spare him or murder him. Killing him means he dies, if you believe it. And sparing him indoctrinates him into your cult. Once he's in your cult, he will be dismissive of your achievements. You can bring him objects from the areas of his siblings and make him reminisce on the times they shared together before all this. When you return to the hallway, you might notice that in place of the sealed door is now the Mystic Seller, who I named Noodle. They tell you that though you may have defeated the 4 bishops, you did not do it right. While yes, you were wearing the red crown, you were not the god of death, so you weren't able to kill them properly. The bishops, since their defeat, have been reliving the battle over and over again, stuck in time. And so now you're tasked with going to save them from their torment and becoming the true new god of death. After defeating each of them once more, you may indoctrinate them into your cult. Once you give them an offering from their respective lands, they'll ask you to retrieve the piece of themselves that Narinda stole from them during their battle to trap him. Remember the 3 Japanese monkeys? Or in our case, 5? Leshy's eyes that represented the see no evil and the other bishops and their body parts that they lost? These pieces are godly, and they became relics that you can now use in future dungeon runs. Finally, the follower form bishops will ask to visit their temple one last time where they make peace with their past. It's here that they make some sort of lore dump or confession, bless their respective relics, essentially upgrading them, and then they welcome a new fate and future under your rule. At last, the bishop siblings have peace. Another thing the Mystic Seller unlocks for you is a newish area. This new area that replaces the statue of the Red Crown in the hallway is called Purgatory. It's made of the same thing that the Mystic Seller is made of, ether. In this Purgatory, you're able to test your godly abilities without time passing for your cult. Instead of gathering resources in these dungeons, you acquire god tiers and god tier fragments. You can trade the completed god tiers to the Mystic Seller for all sorts of goods like follower forms, decorations, necklaces, pieces of tablets, and holy talismans. But what's the whole deal with this ethereal Mystic Seller anyway? Well, okay, listen. I have a lot of thoughts and theories about the Mystic Cellar and their role in all this. Something I didn't mention earlier is when Kemek went insane, it's hinted that she may have spoken to the Mystic Cellar. These two eyes in the white glow of ether look an awful lot like the Mystic Cellar's eyes. Something that's been perplexing to me is how are all the crowns scattered around the land during the era of the Heretic? And how was Kemek able to potentially turn her own legs into a crown? So while we know that Kemek and the Mystic Cellar communicated, we don't exactly know what they talked about because there's no text. I do have my own little theory, so come along with me as I paint you a picture. One of the perks of the Mystic Cellar is trading god tiers for goods. I like to think that Kemek talked to the Mystic Cellar and made some sort of trade or deal. Kemek longed for the power that gods held. She wanted the crown, the temple, the followers, all of it. None of the crowns that she was in charge of were right for her, so she didn't want to wear them. Instead, she wanted to have her own crown that felt like a piece of her, but she was incapable of making her own, or at least incapable of making one with any power. If we take a look at Kemek's crown in-game, it has 3 eyes, and I don't know if you guys know this, legs typically don't have eyes. So where exactly would she have gotten these eyes from? Well, it would be none other than the Mystic Cellar themselves. Luckily for Kemek, she had something that the Mystic Cellar wanted, the crowns. In exchange for the crowns, the Mystic Cellar would take some godly material and a piece of the ether and make Kemek her very own. The only godly material Kemek had, though, was her own body, so she tore off her legs, giving it to the ether being who made the signature 3-eyed crown. This new crown, unlike the others we know of, is able to find relics and godly matter. Because Kemek broke her nature of not only wielding a powerful object like a crown, but giving up her only purpose and job as a crown holder, she became insane. It's also possible that her crown played a part in her insanity. Her crown isn't just sitting on her head, it's burrowing into her. It's as if the crown knows it was once a part of her and is trying to attach itself back. So while this theory could explain how Kemek's crown was made and why she went insane and stopped being the crown keeper, it doesn't answer the question of why the Mystic Cellar wanted these crowns and how the crowns ended up all across the land. As we know, the Mystic Cellar is made of the ether, and the ether itself knows what the past, present, and future hold. Being everything, everywhere, all at once.
What is that? I got bored one day, and I put everything on a bagel.
The Mystic Cellar knew what creatures found which crowns, and when they did. The Mystic Cellar was able to place the crowns around the lands of the Old Faith in spots they knew the correct crown wielders would find them at. Shamura had found their purple crown by it falling into their web. The Mystic Cellar likely put it there for them to find. Leshy the worm found his green crown while wiggling around in the dirt one day and thought it might have been the one to find him. Well, Leshy, 2 things can be true. The crown did find him, and he found it because it was all according to how time and the ether had seen it, in theory. The Mystic Cellar was behind all of this, everything. The Mystic Cellar is doing what needs to be done to make sure the timeline goes according to plan, that nature and fate do as they're supposed to, or something. Again, this is all theory. I am very open to being wrong and hearing your guys' thoughts on the matter. This tinfoil crown is starting to hurt my head. Oh, do you guys feel that? Ooh, really, I'm starting to feel really cold all of a sudden. It almost feels like it's snowing? So now that we have the history and base game lore explained, we can finally talk about the in-game aspects of the Cult of the Lambs DLC, Woolhaven. In the early days of you starting your cult, a mysterious cyan lamb shrine will appear near the top of your paradise. This statue requires offerings from each of the 4 areas. With each offering, you are giving strength to the weak Yngya. Wait, weak Yngya? But wasn't she defeated by the Old Faith? And to that, my dear viewer, I will say, mostly. A piece of Yngya still lives, her heart. If you'll recall, Yngya's heart, a possible relic yet to be found by Kemek, was used in the lamb's ritual to rot the world. Here's the thing though, since the lambs performed the ritual, they sort of brought Yngya back to life to a certain degree. As the flesh of the lambs and Yngya's dead heart mixed, it became this rotten amalgamation, clinging onto the last bit of life that the lambs sacrificed to it. So though Yngya still kind of lives in the rot, she is extremely weak. In giving her statue these offerings, she gains more strength and abilities. After giving her the last offering, the lamb has a grand vision of being called back to a mountain, Yngya, by Yngya. You see followers worship her in her godly form, and then boom, you're teleported back to your cult, and a path opens to Woolhaven. Upon entry, Woolhaven is in disarray. The buildings are destroyed, and everything is overgrown and riddled with a mixture of debris and vermin. The ground shakes as statues/graves of her disciples pray that Yngya brings them back home. The lamb goes up Iwafal and discovers Yngya's statue. Her bell reaches out to you, and a great blast occurs, with the lamb spirits being drawn to the statue. You take the lamb spirits, teleport back to your cult, and then head back to Woolhaven. By returning them to Yngya's statue, she speaks to you. She tells you how the bishops slayed her and left her to rot, but with your help, she's been rejuvenated. She now asks that you venture forth and bring her lambs back home to strengthen her even more and bring back winter. The spirits of the lambs have been wandering out and getting lost without a shepherd to guide them, but now you can be their shepherd. As you go forth on top of the mountain, you'll discover a substance that looks like rock and flesh, known as rotburn. This rotburn is required to warm your colt as the winter returns, threatening to freeze them. However, as we know, the rot is comprised of the bodies of the lambs from the ritual, as well as all lamb corpses that weren't frozen over on the mountain. Think about that while your followers warm themselves by the fire. At the end of your dungeon runs in Iwifall, you'll enter the final room. Each final room has a statue that turns rotten as you either save 4 lost lambs or solve puzzles and release the special lamb wool of Yngya's disciples. Rot grows and spreads with each run, and Yngya's statue in Woolhaven becomes progressively more grotesque with pink flesh. Instead of peace, her words are filled with anger and hatred. This statue may have started as a piece of Yngya, but with every lamb you bring, the less Yngya you are able to hear, as the hatred of the lambs overpowers her voice. The lambs are especially hateful of a new resident and group that appeared after their demise. See, with Yngya and the lambs dead, the mountain had become abandoned, but it was not abandoned for long, as new residents appeared. One resident lived on top of the mountain, and the other lived underneath it. The resident that lived on top of the mountain was a wolf named Marcosius. He discovered the abandoned mountain and said, "It's free real estate." Marcosius was once a disciple and a follower of Shemura, but after years of being mistreated by the old faith, Marcosius had enough. He grew to despise gods, crowns, and bishops. He saw them as greedy, taking everything for themselves and destroying anything in their path. He thought that the bishops and all gods were using their followers as disposable pawns. They didn't value their followers' lives, according to him. Marcosius swore to free all those under the old faith, as he saw these followers as prisoners. He just wanted them to live of their own volition. So he established his Free Wolves pack on the top of the mountain, covering all statues of Yngya with wooden versions of himself, and beginning his research for a way to free the old faith followers. But how could he get these devoted followers to change their minds and be released from the years of propaganda? Conversion therapy. More specifically, shock therapy. Marcosius didn't have a crown to give him power, nor did he want or need one. Instead, he discovered electricity on the mountain, and with the use of science, he tried to find a way to wield it. Marcosius was a budding scientist, but he wasn't a skilled craftsman. Thus, he required the assistance of a blacksmith. Either intentionally or by coincidence, Marcosius was able to find the lost soul of Raimi, the lamb blacksmith, in their sacred wool. He was able to convince or coerce Raimi into working for him, and that they did. Raimi made Marcosius these electric-powered gauntlets he would use to electrocute the Old Faith's followers. After the completion of the gauntlets, he allowed Raimi to leave. But the lamb was too scared to return to Woolhaven and be the only one in town, so they chose to return to their sacred wool in anticipation of the ritual's completion or the prophesied return of the lamb. With his newly made gauntlets, Marcosius began experimenting on different followers of the Old Faith, releasing them from their cult. For many years, Marcosius worked towards this goal. His pack grew on the mountains, and the lambs became angry that their land was being taken over. They impatiently waited for the last lamb to perish so their plans could finally come to fruition. That is where you come in. As you climb these mountains in search of the lambs, you face Marcosius and his Free Wolf pack. They of course want to get you off their mountain and destroy your cult. Marcosius tests you by forcing you to give up different resources. In your final battle with him, the guy detests you for trying to stop him as he's trying to free the world from being enslaved. Based? After defeating him, you can either choose to kill him or spare and indoctrinate him. I said you can indoctrinate. Oh, that's metal as fuck. GG, Marcosius. With the resident on the top of the mountain taken care of, we can finally delve into the inhabitant of the rotten underground. The inside of the mountain rumbles and calls for you. On your quest to journey inside, you will find the Executioner. This is the very same Executioner that killed you in the beginning of the game, and the same Executioner that killed your people, the lambs. While it's very easy to be angry and upset at the Executioner, let's take a moment to look into their past. The story of this character is much more complex than meets the eye. The Executioner, also known as Hagar, was a follower of the Old Faith, but when she became tasked with genociding the lambs, Hagar had qualms. She resisted killing the lambs as she believed they were innocent. They didn't go against the Old Faith, so why was she tasked with killing them? This might be my headcanon, but Hagar seems to have an innocent until proven guilty mindset. She was aware that by going against their command, she was going to face consequences. In her own words, gods cannot be disobeyed. For refusing orders from higher command, the Old Faith plucked out one of her eyes. Even still, she refused to kill another lamb when they commanded it. But no deed goes unpunished with the Old Faith, and they went on to pluck out her other eye. Now blind, Hagar had nothing left to give to the Old Faith. By that point, with nothing left to give other than her life, she complied and killed the lambs as she was commanded. When you come face to face, Hagar is fearful of you and thinks you're a ghost of a lamb she killed. She feels tremendous guilt and remorse for the lives that she stole. After she killed them all, she exiled herself out of the mountain and amongst the rot to pay penance for her sins of genociding the lamb population. It seems that after your execution, the Old Faith let her go, or perhaps she fled from them. She escaped to the depths of the mountain where the lamb's bodies lay in unrest. Hagar flees as rot monsters approach. She doesn't want to fight them or you. Every time you meet Hagar, she wishes she could turn back time and fears the wrath that you may have for her. In the final room, you meet with her under the mountain, and she tells you that the reason she's here is that she had followed the ghosts of the lambs, and this is where they led her. She saw how the lambs were drawn to this specific location. She made graves here and laid flowers for them, hoping they might find peace and rest at last. She tells you that she would have done the same for you had you not come back with such rage. She expresses to you how she never wanted any of this and that she knows her soul is damned for all that she's done. She still hears their cries and smells their blood, and she wants it to stop. The final battle ensues with intermittent pauses of her confessing thoughts and sins. She says that no matter what, followers are punished whether they listen to their gods or disobey them. She wishes to stop living. As she says these things, the skeletons of lambs wielding weapons come alive and attack you. Are these skeletons trying to finish the ritual? Do they have pity on Hagar and want you to leave her alone? The battle ends. You have the choice of pardoning her or executing her. If you execute her, she says she understands and hopes that wherever she goes, there are no gods. Then she dies. If you choose to pardon her, she questions why you'd show such mercy and asks what kind of god you really are. But her story doesn't just end here. Later you can find her in Woolhaven and she expresses gratitude towards you for forgiving her even though she doesn't really think she deserves it. She tells you how much she wants to help. She wishes to plant flowers and hopes the other lambs will like them. Unfortunately for Hagar, the lambs are angered at you for putting this traitor in their village, and they ask you to take care of her. You have the choice to spare her or execute her. If you choose to execute her, she says that she's glad she could see the sky one last time. Girl, you're blind. How are you seeing anything? A sentient axe cuts off her head, and the lambs of the village are glad to see justice. Sariel tells you to leave the body and that they'll deal with it. If you instead choose to indoctrinate Hagar, she questions where she'll go before you portal her back to your own cult. Yngya tells you that you're too forgiving. Remy threatens to kill Hagar themselves if the hyena returns to Woolhaven. By the way, Hagar is a hyena, just be clear. Last, Barak remarks that you have a kind heart. Once indoctrinated in your cult, Hagar is able to run around with the other cult members, bumping into things because she's blind, but at last she has a place to call home. She eventually gives you a piece of a legendary weapon that you can craft with Remy, an axe called the Lamb's Slaughter. With Marcosius put to rest and the executioner taken care of in one way or another, we can finally go with the lambs to the heart of the mountain to complete the ritual and face what is left of Yngya. You enter the rotten area, and it calls for you. Unlike our snowy introduction to Woolhaven, mangled corpses replace the snow piles of the hall and the pathway. Instead of hearing the words I or me, we hear we. This seven-eyed heart is no longer Yngya. It is all the lambs merged together with no sense of individuality or identity. Hate has consumed and rotted them. All they want is for everything to end. The ghost lambs from Woolhaven appear and they confess their actions in cutting out Yngya's heart, telling you to lay down your life for the ritual to finally be completed. Rot grows on the ground and grabs you, pulling you in to consume you. When you decline, you release yourself from the rot, but it just grabs you again and the ghosts are insistent that you sacrifice yourself. Again, you decline, ripping the rot from your limbs, but the rot grabs you once more. They need to complete their ritual. They've waited years for this moment. One last time you decline, tearing yourself free, and finally, the rot stops trying to grab you. The group of ghosts enter the heart and it enlarges. Then tens or hundreds of lamb souls enter the heart and it transforms. Out comes the skeleton head of Yngya, and limbs form from the rotten mass. A battle ensues, or rather, if you want a battle, it ensues. In this final boss room, you don't have to do any damage to defeat Yngya. She just spits out rot babies, and in doing so, she drains her health. So if you don't want to hurt the lamb flesh and spirit amalgamation, you don't have to. You just have to live long enough for her life to drain. When her life finally ends, her skull breaks into pieces and she ejects all of the souls of the lambs. The disciple ghosts speak to the heart as it writhes in pain. It's only now that they realize what they've done to their god. They took her heart, the very thing that gave her life, and instead of letting their goddess of peace rest, they've tortured her with pain and suffering for years, using their own god as a tool for their revenge. They beg for forgiveness and finally think that change and renewal can occur. From the rot monster comes Yngya, in a petite lamb follower form. Rather confused, she asks where she is and if she's in your flock, and then you portal her into your cult for her to become a member, naturally. Returning to Woolhaven, the ghost disciples are gathered around Yngya's rot-covered statue. The rot breaks away, revealing the statue intact underneath, and the flowers grow in the rot's place. The statue reverberates, and the rot that covered the mountain disappears. Yngya does not remember much at the start, but over time she begins to recall pieces. You can find her in Woolhaven one day, and she tells you what had happened all those years ago. She feels bad that you had to go through so much to save the world, and that you had to do it alone. But you did it. You saved the lamb ghosts from their rotten demise. You saved the world. The lamb from the prophecy fulfilled their destiny. The last lamb. Maybe. So, remember how I said the baby in the basket was the last lamb? And, well, maybe it's sort of implied that the lamb you play as is the baby lamb? Well, the developers cannot confirm or deny that, so who fucking knows what that means? Is there gonna be an even bigger update in the future, or are they just being weird to make us squirm? What's going on? Who is the last lamb? Who's the baby? Who is this? But what did you think of Cult of the Lamb? What choices would you have made? Or what choices did you make, considering you've probably played the game? Would you have saved the executioner or executioned her? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you to all of my YouTube members and patrons. I wouldn't be here without you guys. And now here's a brief word from my girlfriend, Kelp. She basically made the whole video.
Hi everyone, Kelp here. I've loved this game so much since its release, and I just really needed us to do a video on it to kind of scratch an itch. I just wanted to say thank you so much to Massive Monster and literally everyone who had anything to do with Cult of the Lamb. Rest in peace to Riverboy, who did all of the music and sound for the game up until this Woolhaven DLC. This music is literally ingrained in my veins. I can't get it out of my head, so rest easy, Riverboy. Amazing job to Local Woman for all of the sounds and music in the Woolhaven DLC, and everyone else who worked on the audio. Those were massive shoes to fill, and everyone did such a great job. And lastly, I just wanted to give a huge thank you to the kind souls of the Massive Monster Cult of the Lamb Discord for answering all of my questions and helping me comprehend all of this lore. So thank you guys so much for helping me and talking to me. I really appreciate it. Since I'm here, you know, I thought I might put a little rant in. In the base game, you can choose to give up your crown and die to Narinder, right? But in the final ritual of the Woolhaven DLC, you can't just accept your demise and have the rot consume the world. I wouldn't have chosen that if it was an option, but it seems a little weird that you're not given a choice. I don't know. It's not that big of a deal, I guess. Wait, where are you guys going? I'm not done yet.